Hello, I'm Sean Zahidi, Vice President of RAD Marketing, and this is the fourth episode of the Future Frontiers in Residential Real Estate podcast. Today, we're here for a special episode with Ene Underwood, the CEO of Habitat for Humanity Greater Toronto Area, and Joshua Benard, Vice President of Real Estate Development. Together, they help working families build the strength, stability, and self-reliance through affordable homeownership, building a better GTA for everyone. Okay, hello, Ene and Josh. Thanks for accepting my invitation to come into our fourth podcast, Future Frontiers of Real Estate in Ontario. As part of RAD Marketing, we're very privileged to work with a lot of developers across GTA. And one of the things that we notice, especially in the past few years, is unaffordability is a big issue in the city. And that's one of the reasons we started sourcing and looking for a collaboration with an organization that help that mandate and that mission, which is tackling unaffordability and helping home ownership. So, and we're lucky that we've been involved with Habitat for Humanity GTA for the past year or so. And that's why we're having this conversation, because I believe this is time of year, especially as we get closer to the end of fiscal year. And a lot of organizations looking for some partnerships, some donations to organizations that really mean something to them. And that's why we think that this is a really important questions and basic conversation to have. Ian, again, thanks for coming to our podcast. But first off, tell us more about yourself and your journey over the years and how you ended up being with Habitat for Humanity GTA.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us and thanks for asking. So I've been the CEO at Habitat for Humanity Greater Toronto Area now for almost 10 years. We actually formed through the amalgamation of some other habitats over the course of this decade. And my life prior to that, I actually started in the private sector and then spent a big chunk of my career in publicly funded healthcare, but really had a yearning to get back to using business thinking to do good. And that's what I love about the Habitat model. It's a social enterprise that says, how can we use business thinking, particularly in the development sector, to do good?
Okay, perfect. Thank you again for coming. Josh, back to you. So tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been at Habitat for about coming up on 4 years, and I'm in the VP of Real Estate Development. So I have the job of finding land for our affordable housing, which is becoming more and more difficult in the GTA. Prior to Habitat, I was actually out west for a number of years, working for a nonprofit out there doing affordable housing development. And then previous to that, I was actually working in the private sector doing construction. So I have a kind of background in construction, and then I really just wanted to see kind of more good, and the buildings that I was building actually kind of have more of an impact on the community, and that's how I kind of fell into the nonprofit sector and fell in love with Habitat.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming to our podcast. I know a lot of our audience have heard of Habitat, but can you dive in deeper to that and tell us more about Habitat, their its mission and everything? So maybe.
Yeah, it's interesting because we often say Habitat is well known, but not known well. So, for any of the listeners, I think if you close your eyes and you think of Habitat, what you're probably going to see is a bunch of volunteers swinging hammers, and maybe even with Jimmy Carter. And what we'd like people to think about when they close their eyes and think of Habitat is this nimble, business-minded charity that is constantly adapting and coming up with new approaches to give a hand up to working families who need an alternative pathway to become a homeowner. And so, that's really what Habitat is. Now, and we've changed a lot over the years. So that home now that the family owns, might be a stacked town home that volunteers like RAD Marketing have helped build, or it might be a condo in a high rise that's come through our developer partnerships, which Josh can talk about. Might be a mid rise that we've, built through contractors. But what has not changed over the years about what Habitat is the notion of this giving a hand up to working families in our community to help them have a home that works for them and that has a mortgage that they can afford. And to where you started the podcast, the intensity of need now in our communities is greater than ever before. So it also means that for us now, in addition to just delivering homes for families, we're also trying to just raise our voice in general over affordable housing, but affordability writ large.
Absolutely. Yes. I couldn't agree more with you. Like, as I said earlier, so we're lucky to represent a lot of developers across GTA, and pretty much one of the most important conversations revolves pricing and cost, associated with these future projects that we're involved. And I don't see any slowdown on that end of the business. So meaning that with all like new immigrants, newcomers coming to this country, like we're talking 500,000 per year, 40% of those people are going to settle in Greater Toronto and Hamilton area. That's going to put huge upward pressure on our market, and I don't see, unfortunately, any slowdown in our price depreciation and costs associated with these things. Going to Josh, can you talk more about Habitat Homes and given the prices of these lands and in terms of land acquisition and the type of product and homes that you bring to the community? Can you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we kind of have four different scenarios that we develop across the GTA. As Ian mentioned, we're no longer doing the single family home. So a lot of our stuff is, or all of our stuff is a condo of some sort. So whether it be a piece of land that we go out and find and redevelop and build on ourselves with volunteers, that's kind of one scenario. Again, it's usually stacked townhouses, back-to-back townhouses. We're hopefully going to be starting construction on our first mid-rise site next year. But the other scenarios where we work with the private sector and they'll take a site through development and then sever off a small piece for us to again build on. There's some scenarios where we work with developers and they actually give us turnkey units, so units within a building. And then we're more recently starting to work with other nonprofits and partner with them on sites that they either already own or that we go after together.
Okay, fantastic. So the criteria for families that basically can enroll in Habitat for Humanity programs and sign up for those basically alternative home ownerships. So can you expand on that?
Yeah. And again, it's one of those things that it's changed over time for us and it hasn't changed at the same time. So it starts with the fact that it's home ownership. So however you're accessing home ownership, it begins with you've got to have an income that you're going to be able to use to service a mortgage. And so in our case, we modify the income levels for every project we're involved in because we talk about having an affordable mortgage. So by affordable mortgage, we mean 32% of your total household income is what should go to shelter. And we include in that the condo fees, property tax, home insurance, and then your mortgage principal and interest. So given that condo fees and prop tax can vary by project, we start with that to say, okay, well, how much income does that need? And then we have a certain threshold of having and wanting families to pay enough principal that they really are building equity. So that first piece of income is what then determines, okay, what's the income level for each project, which today and now for most of our projects, that income's going to range from a low mid 70s it'll go up to $100,000. And in some cases, depending on family size and condo fees, it may be a bit over 100,000. So there's your first criteria of income. The second one is they need to be a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen. Another key piece is that we call it willingness to partner, but it means getting an understanding of what is this Habitat model and is it going to work for the family. So I think you're familiar. It includes the notion of volunteer hours in lieu of a down payment, because most of the folks we're working with, they've by the time they pay rent and take care of their family, they haven't been able to save any down payment, let alone the size you need today. So the quid pro quo is volunteer hours, but doesn't work for everybody. And the other part of our model is it's not the same as buying on the market where you get 100% of the market gain. Here, we have a formula for appreciation. So that, again, people have to say, is that for me? And then the final part of it is if we have, more qualified families than we have homes, of course, it comes down to need. In terms of crowding, in terms of safety considerations, health considerations of the family. So, at any given point in time, who needs this opportunity the most?
Fantastic. Back to Josh. Home ownership. I think it's part of Canadian dream, right? Like I think latest stats shows that still 80% of Canadians, they do like to own something versus if you look at European countries, that number is that ratio is completely reversed, like 30% to 40% ownership, right? But it seems like a lot of people, especially in middle class students out of university as a newcomers, being kind of like left out, and they can't reach that goal or fulfill that goal of home ownership, and it's getting harder and harder for a lot of people to get to that point. My question to you is, why do you think home ownership is important for Canadians, and what is it that Habitat's doing to help that situation?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think, when you think about what home ownership offers, I think it's a really important quality. So when I rent in Toronto, and the irony of that is that I work for an organization that believes in giving, that providing affordable home ownership opportunities. So, but I rent because it's expensive to live here, and I have a young family. We need space. The thing that I worry about as a renter is, is my landlord going to sell the property, or want to move in or increase the rent? So the stability that comes with owning your home, and knowing that that nobody can evict you is a really key component, and the ability for that individual to build equity over a period of time so that they can either support their kids in terms of education, whether it's retirement. Like, these are important things for a lot of people to get, and it's a lot difficult. It's a lot more difficult when you're renting. And we've done comparisons looking at a project with TCHC in Alex Park, where we kind of took the exact same income, the rent that they were going to charge, the affordable rent versus affordable home ownership that we were offering. And while they were paying a little bit more per month because we had to pay for condo fees and property tax, at the end of the day, they ended up with all the equity. They ended up with a big portion of equity. So to me, it really demonstrated that while we need more affordable rental in the city, and it's specifically for a totally different kind of income bracket than what we're serving, Habitat home ownership can really help also relieve the pressure on rentals, so we can help move people through the continuum.
Couldn't agree more with you. Like, I know then we do a lot of market analysis for our developer clients, and one of the staggering numbers that we came up with, if you look at a year over year, in some pockets we're talking over 26% increase in rent. That's a scary number, right? And unfortunately, that's not going to get any better because I believe that the government's not really incentivizing developers to build more rental buildings. And basically, these condos that we bring to market at some point becomes rental building. But the only difference is they're not owned by institutions. They're owned by individuals, and they're all looking at their bottom line too. So the rents keep going up, and the demand is there. That's a problem, right? Okay, so going back to Ian, Brad volunteered in one of your projects, I believe in Oshawa, and some families gonna settle in that complex and that project. Give us more update on that project, and if you can tell us what's happening with that project.
Yeah, well, so first of all, yay, RAD. Great to have you volunteering, and great to have the leadership, Sean, that you and your team have brought to not just volunteering, but to raising the profile of Habitat, to raising money for Habitat. These are the things that enable us to have stories to tell about families that become homeowners. So that project's a 50-unit project. As Josh said earlier, that's actually a project that we are doing in partnership with a nonprofit rental provider. So 24 of those units will be affordable rental, and 26 of them will be Habitat homeowners. We haven't selected all those homeowners yet, but let me give you an example of 2 or 3, Habitat homeowner families. So, I think of one family. The mom in that family is a single mom. Her name is Alyssa. She she works in mental health, so she's a mental health counselor. She has a 10-year-old son and twin daughters who are 8 years old, one of whom is wheelchair dependent. And she, talks about the challenge for anyone working in the social services. Your income's not enough to be able to provide for your family. So she had a second job and still was, had virtually nothing left after paying the rent for her family, and still given her daughter that's wheelchair dependent, really didn't have a home that was functional for their accessibility needs. So they now have moved into a Habitat home, and she's building equity, and and maybe someday won't have to have the 3 jobs in order to make it work for her family. We have another family. It's mom and dad, James and Christina. They're both personal service providers in one of our hospitals, and they also, in addition to carrying their load here, they also are sending a lot of money back home, and so they're trying to balance that with their housing costs. And they have a little girl who's dying to have her own bedroom, but at the moment shares the room with mom and dad, and they're going to be moving into a new Habitat home in a year or so. And then, moving further down the road, I think of the Sanders family. So this is a single mom with 4 children, and they moved in 8 years ago now to homes we built in Brampton. 3 of those 4 children are either in university or have now graduated from university, and mom went back to university. And both the mom and the kids talk about just that sense of confidence and stability to actually set long-term goals that came after they moved into their home. That mom also, when I first met her, she was quite overweight. And the next time I met her, which was a couple of years after she moved in, I thought, is this the same person? And her kids talk with great pride of how it was after they moved into their new home that they noticed their mom had the headspace to really focus on herself and take better care of herself and her health, which, as I said, included university, but it also included just her health and her weight. So it's really cool for us at Habitat, just seeing these stories and the kind of transformation and possibility that happens when people have a home that works for them, the pride of it being their home, and the ability, as Josh said, to build some equity while they're at it.
Oh, honestly, one of the main reasons I really want to do this podcast is stories like that, and that's how people can understand that. To me, Habitat is doing a great job, and these stories are really remarkable. So I was lucky to be invited in one of the grand openings of a site that you had a partnership with, I believe, Diamond Kilmer on Old Western Road, and I was lucky to meet 2 of these families. They're going to be basically settling in this project and those homes. And that basically takes me to my next question for Josh. Tell me more about the partnership that you guys have with private sector and developers, and because that's something that I'm pretty sure that a lot of people don't know about, and maybe that's great for developers to understand how they can be involved and how they can be basically helping the communities by partnering with Habitat for Humanity.
Yeah, well, and there's a lot of different ways that we can continue to be partnering with the real estate sector that I would like to see grow, including things like, if you have a showroom or a sales center, that you giving some of that furniture and that equipment back to our restore so we can sell it there, as well as we're always looking for commercial space for our restores, and also office space would be nice. But what we're doing today is, I guess when I started at Habitat, Ian, how many partners do we have? Do you remember?
I think then we had 2 or 3.
Yeah, so over the last 4 years, we're now at 25 different relationships with real estate developers, and I think in the context of developing in the city of Toronto, it's really challenging, not just for organizations like Habitat, but there's a lot of hurdles to overcome for developers. And regardless of whether it's Bill 108 or Bill 109 or Bill 23 or IZ, the environment is going to continue to change, and there's going to be uncertainty. And what Habitat has figured out how to do really well is provide more certainty in that discussion with city and government and the local community to make sure we have inclusive communities. So, whether it's helping negotiate an OLT settlement with the city and a developer to get more density for the site, which density is good. We have a finite amount of land. And in exchange, we get a bunch of affordable housing units either for free or for a low cost. So, growing those numbers is just one aspect of how we'll continue to serve people within the city of Toronto and beyond.
That's amazing. Yeah. So I really hope that developers listening to this podcast, they take away something, and hopefully they start calling you and to extend their help as well.
And I think I'd just jump in there and say, a key thing here is just Josh is one of the most creative people I've ever met. And pretty much everyone who meets with him says that as well. And so what he does really well is kind of listening to the developer and saying, what do you need? Listening to municipality, what do you need? And just trying to figure out how do we connect these dots in a way that works for everyone. And so we have 25 partners and 35 or so partnerships, right, across those partners. And no two of them are exactly alike, right? Yeah. There is a degree of customizing them. And so there's a lot of opportunity here collectively for us to do more.
And I think while our focus as Habitat is exclusively affordable homeownership, we recognize that as part of a conversation, there would be scenarios where rental or other types of affordable housing would come up. And we wanted to make sure that we had effectively a platform for developers and the city to have a solution the same way we can provide for affordable homeownership. So in partnership with two other nonprofits that provide rental and co-op housing, we set up a federally incorporated nonprofit so that we can actually, it's kind of like a one-stop shop. So if you're the city or a developer and you need to satisfy affordable housing or you want to provide affordable housing within a development, we can either address the rental and homeownership or co-op housing, all in the same kind of breath, which is great. And we've seen a lot of developers actually saying like, oh man, I wish we knew this sooner because you've just saved us a ton of time trying to figure it out on our own.
And I think what's helpful there is most nonprofit rental providers are really good at something we know nothing about at Habitat, which is being landlords and managing affordable rental housing. On the other hand, they're not developers, so they don't have a developer mindset. And so for developers, it may be, okay, we want to do or we need to do some affordable rental. We don't even know who our potential partners are. And that's where Josh is kind of a good middleman of, okay, well, how can we help here at figuring out what do you need, what's a logical partner, etc.
Fantastic. We can have this conversation for hours, in terms of how developers can get involved with organizations like Habitat for Humanity. My next question for Ene, you've been selected as a member of Ontario Housing Affordability Task Force recently, and you've been speaking about a number of public platforms and talking about Bill 23. So if you don't mind, can you expand on that and tell us what exactly that conversation was about and tell us more.
Oh, great. Well, early again, when you opened, you said affordability is now something in everyone's mind. And, it used to just be a conversation that was on the margins, right, for the lowest income households. And now it's so relevant to everyone. And so, for me, I was honored to be asked to be part of this Housing Affordability Task Force. And your listeners know lots about the task force. And then fast forward to now we have Bill 23, which certainly has some elements that look a lot like task force recommendations. I know there's a lot of noise and a lot of opinions out there on Bill 23. I'm super encouraged by Bill 23. I think it reflects a kind of bold, purposeful action that we need. I like that the government is taking this. Okay, here's one wave of legislation. We'll wait 6 months and come out with another one to kind of build on the one before. I like, and I'm sure all your listeners feel the same way, that we were due to rebalance where housing considerations fit versus heritage, environment, neighborhood character, et cetera. And I think that bill is really doing that. And, I think I'd say, and again, I was privileged to also have an opportunity to sit down and across from, Josh was with me. We both had a chance to sit down across from the premier and talk about this legislation. And, what I also find just really encouraging is he genuinely conveys a conviction around reclaiming in Ontario where people can aspire to own a home, that it's not just something for the privileged class, that it's what it was when I grew up, where it was just kind of a given. If you work hard, you save, a bit, you have a bit of patience, you'll be able to own a home. And so he seems really, really motivated around that notion of attainable and affordable ownership. And so I think for all of us, it is a buckle up. We're going to hear more waves of what the government can do in that regard.
That's amazing. So that's going to lead me to my next question, which is basically talking about all the fees the government's basically putting on developers, which I see it firsthand dealing with developers and clients that we have. And we're talking about affordable housing, a portion of development charges, and also inclusionary zoning, which I believe is going to hurt consumers in a way. But I really wanted to hear your point of view on that. If you can expand on what you think, is it really helping consumers and future homeowners, or is it just something that's going to go backward in terms of helping the situation?
Yeah, and like the question of fees and who pays, it's a sensitive one and it's a polarizing one. But I think if people slow down a bit and think about it, it's also a pretty simple one, which is the more money, the more fees we weigh in on the cost of new homes, the more expensive homes will be, not just new homes, but it ripples into my home as a resale home. And the harder it is for, an entire generation of newcomers to Canada and young people, just starting their families, the harder it is for them to be able to have the home they need and be able to get ahead like the previous generation could. So, so therefore I'm very much on the developer side on this one, which some of my colleagues in affordable housing may not feel comfortable with, but I'm on I'd like to think I'm on the side of the population, really, because this notion of development charges, folks know, do include a component around affordable housing. Well, what's it doing in there? All of us should be supporting affordable housing. So let people buy their home and then join the rest of us in paying for affordable housing with property taxes, which does mean property taxes have to go up. So very supportive for that. The specific question around inclusionary zoning, I think most of us can agree with the research that says inclusive communities, are more vibrant communities. They're healthier, and candidly, they have the people in them that we need for a community to work. They'll have people that work in the hospitality sector, that work at the TSO, that are there to kind of sell you a beer at the Raptors game. Like, we need these folks everywhere to have great communities. And so inclusionary zoning is a good concept. The issue is execution. And so, we spoke out with a caution when the City of Toronto was advancing its inclusionary zoning policy. We did not agree with the notion of pushing inclusionary zoning without offsets in it. And I also wrote a blog on the fact that you have to be careful. I called it the frustrating necessity of moving slowly with inclusionary zoning. So back to Bill 23. What Bill 23 has done is it said, yeah, we're going to move slow. We're going to start at 5%, and we are going to have offsets in the form of the exemptions of DCs, parkland dedication, et cetera. That's something I hope that everyone can get on side for. I don't necessarily believe inclusionary zoning is the panacea, but it's a useful tool to work with. Done without this notion of, just burdening the developers of, you guys carry everything. We don't ask the grocers to help everybody else out that can't afford food. And so that shouldn't be true in the case of a societal need for everyone having a home.
Just to expand on that, in one of our episodes, we had Nama Blunder from a Smart Density, and I highly recommend people go and listen to that podcast. And we talked about the same thing, inclusion zoning, and what's really going to do for developers and consumers. One of the problems that I see developers have is that they look at the building and they look at this building is going to be giving me this much margins and profit and everything. And now that I'm going to be dedicating or allocating 5 to 10% of my project to this program, meaning that the rest of 90% of the building is going to be unaffordable. It becomes more unaffordable for the future buyers of these projects. And that's basically not really going to solve the problem in general, right? So I think that was a very interesting conversation. People can go listen to that podcast. Now back to Josh. There's a lot of support coming from government and from municipal to provincial, federal governments. And but does that really help you in terms of like filling the gap and how much you need to raise in terms of donation money for Habitat and to be able to tackle an affordability issue and help people with home ownership?
So the simple answer is no. And I'll expand on that. I mean, I think that like everything helps. So, having DCs and cash in lieu of parkland, we should have had that 4 years ago. So is it helping? No, now we're just catching up in terms of some of these things that we're seeing from government. And I think, unfortunately, because we're having to play catch up, we're going to see things get more unaffordable, more expensive in terms of construction costs. So I think it's going to get worse before it's going to get better. We're going to need to see continued efforts from government in terms of policy. But what we also need to see is people, whether that be corporate or individuals or organizations that are within the sector, give, to organizations like Habitat so that we can help people find affordable housing. And I think ultimately what I'd like to see more of, and we're starting to see this conversation amongst developers, is they love to donate to hospitals and other organizations, and the zoo, and those are really important causes to give to, but they're directly in this industry. And what somebody said to me the other day, it keeps coming back to affordable housing. Like the work that they're doing in building, it's so close to home for them. And so I'm hoping that we see more and more developers step up and partner with organizations like Habitat, not just to give us units, which I love. I'll give my phone number at the end of this thing, and you can put it up on the screen so people call me. But it's also to give to us. We need cash. We need to pay for materials and to buy land and things of that nature.
That actually interesting that you talked about all that. That's gonna basically lead us to the next question and our last question that you partially answered. So I'm going to go to Ian on that, and that's the development community and basically real estate industry in general. And what is it that they can do when it comes to that? Can be like suppliers, realtors, brokers, developers, city planners, city officials. What is it that you think they can do? And I'm really hoping that we can have you back maybe in a year, in 2 years, and look back and say, okay, this is what we've done. And I really hope that this conversation that we're having today is going to help that as well. So maybe just go back to Ian.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a critical question, and it's exactly the right place to end this conversation. Is I think most people listening will agree the depth of the housing crisis in this country has never been greater, and it does imperil, as I said earlier, an entire generation of young people and of newcomers to the country. This is not as fair of a country as it used to be, and that doesn't feel good for any of us. And everyone in the real estate, and none of us created this problem. Nobody woke up in the morning and said, gee, I want to make housing unaffordable. I want to make people's lives miserable. Nobody did that, but we have to say we all own it. And so people in the real estate sector, I think, are uniquely positioned to be contributing to the solutions. And Josh has rhymed off like a number of ways the development sector can do that. And I would just pile on that shout out. And it is both, in terms of the actual partner with us on units. If you're in the business of building units, if you're in the business of financing, talk to us there as well. And I think, and Josh picked up on the other one, this is also about, you within your organizations and you as an individual. Like if you're listening to this podcast and you're looking around your home and it's pretty comfortable and what, the kind of wealth that you've been able to accumulate through real estate and other things, you have an opportunity to use that kind of privilege and advantage to give a hand up to folks that don't have it, to create a more fair country. And that's both an individual decision in terms of philanthropy, and it's a corporate decision. And again, I get it's difficult, because, if you're sitting there as a developer, you're thinking, it's not about me, it's about what my investors need as a rate of return, right? But there's also but let's have different conversations with our investors about, again, real estate sector is literally laying down the infrastructure and the buildings that are the lived experience of future generations. So all of us in the real estate sector are uniquely positioned to change the picture of what our children and our grandchildren are experiencing living in our communities. So I think there is an opportunity for all of us all of us that have a decent home today and that are involved in some way in the real estate sector to step up and say, hey, we can do more. We can do more and we have to do more. So we have a future that turning over in our grave, we're feeling proud to have been part of creating.
And I think, just to add quickly, people may be surprised that we both donate to Habitat. So we work for Habitat, but we believe in the fact that we're working in this industry. We're working for, I donate to other nonprofits that provide housing to homeless individuals. So I think it's the same kind of, philosophy that we should hopefully see from others as well.
Absolutely. So, and on that note, you both know that we're 100% there for Habitat for Humanity, GTA, and we're going to continue our involvement. And as a matter of fact, this year we have started our campaign, and we're hoping to raise even more money this year for you and to be able to help these families. Like I said previously, I was privileged to meet 2 of these families, and I can't tell you how touching that moment was for me. And I know a lot of our friends and peers in the business, they're helping hospitals, and other, basically organizations, which is great. We all need that, but unaffordability is a big issue, and I think collectively our whole industry need to step up their games and to be able to help. Just to wrap, I just want to thank you both. I know you're both busy individuals, both to Ian and Josh. It was a pleasure to have you here. And I'm really hoping that next time we sit down, we'll look back and say, you know what? This very podcast helped us to bring more awareness and raise more money for Habitat for Humanity. Thank you again.
Fantastic. Thanks for the conversation.